We have this aversion in this country to knowing about our past, and anything that is unpleasant, we don't want to deal with. This is not going away.
Nothing goes away.
Nothing goes away, especially if you ignore it. So read the books they're banning. That's where the good stuff is.
That's right.
If they don't want you to read it, there's a reason why.
Welcome back. That was a clip of my dear friend LeVar Burton, the host of Reading Rainbow, discussing book bans with our good friends over at The View. Now, the three-time Emmy Award-winning host, author of Summer on the Bluffs, and attorney Sunny Hostin joins us now. Sunny's also an honorary spokesperson for Banned Books Week for the New Rochelle Public Library Foundation. Also joining our conversation, Professor Shannon Oltmann. Shannon teaches information science at the University of Kentucky, where she specializes in researching the history of censorship and the culture behind book banning. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
I mean, Sunny, I know that you focused on this for a very long time from a legal standpoint, from a freedom of speech standpoint. I think the core of this question is, when people who ban books, how do they reconcile their love of the Constitution and the First Amendment?
Well, they can't, right? Because the very bedrock of our democracy, so we say in this country, is the Constitution. And I don't think it's any accident that the First Amendment is the first and not the fourth or the fifth or the sixth or the 13th. And so the First Amendment is freedom of speech, it's freedom of expression, freedom of religion, all those freedoms that we hold so tightly. And when you ban a book, you take that away from the person who wants to read it. You take away from the author, and you take it away from the young person who is going to read that and formulate their own expression and opinion. And so I don't think there's an explanation for it other than the fact that when you start moving away from our Constitution, you start moving towards fascism.
You know, Shannon, it is so complex in that one of my guests today happens to be a mom who is African American. She did not want books in the school that had the N-word because the idea of students reading that out loud, she felt hurt her child. The layers of this, but at the end of the day, as Sunny said, and LeVar Burton and many others, if you remove this, how do you grow? How do you evolve? How do you learn?
Right.
What do you think is behind this recent surge? I mean, here in 2022 versus, as I said at the beginning of the show, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. When I was a kid in the 70s, that was my favorite book. I still have my original copy. Thank goodness they didn't burn it. But, you know, what do you think is at the root of it now?
I think there are a few things going on here. One is a distrust of public institutions like schools, public libraries, and there's a religious conservatism that views itself as being the most right perspective, and they tend to fear differing points of view. Most of the books that are being challenged these days, if you look at them carefully, they either have authors or protagonists who are people of color or people from the LGBTQ community. And so it's these differing viewpoints that make some people uncomfortable. They make some people feel welcome and seen and heard.
You know, when you look at educators, just like with first responders and police officers, we say, protect the police. And then when it's something like January 6th, it's like, well, maybe that's not important. We say protect teachers and librarians, but now teachers and librarians are being attacked for trying to teach.
Yeah, there is even legislation that would attack teachers and librarians for putting books on the shelves. And I just want to make the point here that nobody, teachers and librarians included, nobody wants children exposed to pornography and obscenity. But that's not what's going on.
Right. And that's the thing. I think when you look at it legally, the two areas that you can make the argument this book should be off the shelf, it's obscenity, is the big one, I think. But other than that, and how do you
But what do we
define...
say to the black mom who says the N-word is obscene?
Exactly.
And I don't, so what
well,
is...
how do you define obscenity?
Right.
How do you define that? I would say that N-word has been historically used. It's a word that had real meaning for people. And it's a word that some in our community have tried to reclaim. But by taking that word, which is really a racial slur, you are trying to erase history.
What about criminal charges? Because you're now hearing that librarians, teachers criminally charged if they keep books in circulation that were pulled off the shelves by school boards.
I don't think that that will hold.
Okay.
Typically speaking, you do have these school boards that have outrageous power in these small districts. And you have to think about the difference between a public school board and a private school board, because when you're at a private school, you can do things like this, unfortunately. But not when we're talking about public taxpayer dollars that we're using.
A public library.
A public library. I think that even if it goes, let's say, to a local court, and then it's going to go to an appellate court, I don't have the most faith, unfortunately, in the politicization of our Supreme Court right now, but I can't imagine that they would let that pass.
Well, I'll tell you, the best of what I've learned is when you have the ability to read and open your life and open your eyes.
Sure.
And if you have, to Sunny's point, small school districts saying, this is what the kids read in this neck of the woods, as Al Roker would say, this is what the kids read in this, we are further dividing.
Yes.
We're now saying these kids learn this over here. Now in another state, in another community, they have access. And then we wonder why we're divisive. We wonder why we don't understand. We also wonder why kids bully. If you read about it, maybe you'd understand it. I mean, it blows my mind.
It's also really important here to note that book banners are in the minority. Recent research shows that 2/3 of Americans across the political spectrum don't want to ban books in schools.
That's important. That's, you know what? Thank you for saying that, because so often we focus on
the loudest voices.
the louder voices.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Sunny, Shannon, thank you. And of course, you can always see Sunny on the hit show, The View.